If you're over 60 years old and storing these common foods in your refrigerator, you might be unknowingly creating the perfect environment for dangerous bacterial growth that could land you in the emergency room. What I'm about to share with you has sent dozens of my patients to the hospital, and the worst part is, they had no idea they were doing anything wrong. My name is Dr. Helen Brooks, and I've been a geriatric medicine specialist for over 20 years. In my practice, I've seen how something as simple as improper food storage can lead to serious health complications, especially for seniors whose immune systems aren't as robust as they used to be. Today, I'm going to reveal 9 foods that you should never, ever keep in your refrigerator, and I'll explain exactly why this matters so much more as we age. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed yet, I strongly recommend hitting that subscribe button and turning on the notification bell, so you never miss another health tip made, especially for you. If you find this video helpful, please leave your questions and video suggestions in the comments. I read every single one, and it helps me create more content to help people just like you. And if you're watching this right now, give me a thumbs up so I know you're paying attention to these crucial warnings. Let me tell you about someone who learned this lesson the hard way. Margaret, a 73-year-old retired teacher, came to my office last year complaining of severe stomach cramps and diarrhea that had lasted for 3 days. She was dehydrated, weak, and honestly, quite frightened. After running some tests, we discovered she had a nasty bacterial infection. When we investigated the source, we found it was from tomatoes she'd been storing in her refrigerator. Margaret looked at me in disbelief and said, "But doctor, I thought the fridge kept everything safe." That moment changed how I educate my patients about food storage, and it's exactly why I'm making this video today. The first food you need to remove from your refrigerator right now is tomatoes. I know this sounds counterintuitive because we've all been taught that cold temperatures preserve food, but with tomatoes, the opposite is true. When you refrigerate tomatoes, something fascinating and dangerous happens at the cellular level. The cold temperature breaks down the membranes inside the tomato cells, turning them into a mushy, flavorless version of what they should be. But here's the real problem for seniors. This membrane breakdown creates tiny pockets where bacteria can multiply rapidly. When you take that tomato out of the fridge and leave it on the counter to come to room temperature, those bacteria explode in number. For someone with a compromised immune system, which includes most people over 65, this can lead to serious gastrointestinal infections. Margaret's case wasn't unique. She had been buying tomatoes in bulk, refrigerating them, and then using them throughout the week. Every time she pulled one out, she was essentially eating a bacterial breeding ground. After 2 weeks of treatment and significant discomfort, Margaret now keeps her tomatoes in a bowl on her kitchen counter, away from direct sunlight, and she's never had that problem again. If you're still watching and finding this information valuable, comment with a thumbs up emoji below to show me you're taking these warnings seriously. I need to know that this message is reaching the people who need it most. Now, the second food might shock you even more because I know for a fact that almost everyone watching this video has done this. I'm talking about bread. Yes, that loaf of whole wheat or rye bread sitting in your refrigerator right now is actually becoming less nutritious and potentially more dangerous. Every single day it stays there. Here's what happens. When bread is exposed to the cold, dry environment of a refrigerator, a process called retrogradation occurs. This is when the starch molecules in the bread crystallize and become firm. You've probably noticed that refrigerated bread becomes hard and stale tasting. But what you can't see is that this process also creates an environment where mold spores can develop more easily. The problem is that these mold spores aren't always visible to the naked eye, especially if you have any vision problems, which many seniors do. Let me tell you about Robert, a 68-year-old former construction worker who came to my clinic with respiratory issues. Robert had been experiencing shortness of breath, a persistent cough, and fatigue for several weeks. After extensive testing and a thorough discussion about his daily habits, we discovered he had been eating bread that he stored in his refrigerator. The bread had developed microscopic mold that he couldn't see, and he'd been consuming small amounts of mycotoxins with every sandwich he made. Robert said to me, "Doctor Brooks, I put it in the fridge because I thought that's how you make it last longer." What Robert didn't understand is that bread should either be kept at room temperature in a bread box or sealed container for up to 5 days, or frozen if you need longer storage. The refrigerator is the worst of both worlds. It makes bread stale while simultaneously creating moisture pockets where mold thrives. After we identified the source of his respiratory problems and he changed his storage habits, Robert's symptoms cleared up within 3 weeks. He now freezes half of every loaf he buys and keeps the rest in an airtight container on his counter. But if you think those first 2 were surprising, wait until you hear about the third food that absolutely should not be in your refrigerator. I'm talking about onions. Whole, uncut onions stored in the refrigerator become soft, moldy, and lose their nutritional value at an alarming rate. The science behind this is fascinating. Onions are naturally designed to be stored in cool, dry, dark places with good air circulation. When you put them in the humid, enclosed environment of a refrigerator, the moisture causes them to become soft and promotes bacterial growth. Even worse, if you store onions near potatoes in the fridge, which many people do, the onions will absorb moisture and ethylene gas from the potatoes, causing both vegetables to spoil much faster. I'll never forget Patricia, a 76-year-old grandmother who prided herself on her cooking. She came to me complaining of recurring urinary tract infections, which is common in older women, but what wasn't common was how frequently she was getting them. Every month, like clockwork, Patricia would develop another UTI. We tried everything, different treatments, preventive measures, lifestyle changes, but nothing seemed to break the cycle. During one of our appointments, I asked Patricia to walk me through everything she ate in a typical day. She mentioned that she used onions in almost every meal, which is actually healthy. But when I asked where she stored them, she said, "In the vegetable drawer of my refrigerator, doctor." Isn't that where vegetables go? That's when we discovered the connection. The onions she was using had been sitting in her humid refrigerator for weeks, developing bacteria that, while not enough to make her acutely ill, was enough to constantly challenge her urinary system, which was already vulnerable due to her age. Patricia was heartbroken. She said, "I've been making myself sick with my own cooking." But once she started storing her onions in a mesh bag in her pantry and only refrigerating them after cutting them, her chronic UTI problem disappeared. She hasn't had a single infection in over 8 months now. The fourth food on this list is something that many seniors consume daily without realizing they're reducing its health benefits and potentially creating a safety hazard. I'm talking about coffee. Whole coffee beans or ground coffee should never be stored in the refrigerator, and here's why this matters for your health. Coffee is hygroscopic, which means it absorbs moisture, odors, and flavors from everything around it. When you store coffee in the refrigerator, it absorbs the moisture from the air inside, which causes the oils in the coffee to break down and become rancid more quickly. But the real danger isn't just bad-tasting coffee. When those oils become rancid, they produce compounds that can cause digestive upset, inflammation in the gut, and even exacerbate conditions like acid reflux, which many seniors already struggle with. I treated a patient named George, a 70-year-old retired accountant who came to me with increasingly severe acid reflux and stomach pain. George had always enjoyed his morning coffee, 2 cups without fail, but suddenly it was causing him significant discomfort. We tried reducing his coffee intake, switching to decaf, adjusting his medications. Nothing seemed to help. George was frustrated because coffee had been part of his morning routine for 50 years, and now it seemed like his body was rejecting it. During one visit, I asked him if anything had changed in how he prepared his coffee. George thought for a moment and said, "Well, my daughter visited a few months ago and reorganized my kitchen. She put my coffee in the fridge to keep it fresh." Could that matter? It mattered enormously. The refrigerated coffee had been slowly going rancid, and every morning, George was essentially drinking oxidized oils that were irritating his digestive system. Once he moved his coffee to an airtight container in his pantry, away from heat and light, his symptoms resolved within 2 weeks. George told me, "I got my morning ritual back, Dr. Brooks, and that means more to me than you know." If you're still with me, learning these critical storage mistakes, drop a comment below saying, "I'm paying attention," so I know this information is reaching you. Your engagement helps me understand what content matters most to my viewers. The 5th food might surprise you because it's something we typically associate with needing refrigeration: honey. Pure, natural honey should never be stored in the refrigerator. In fact, honey is one of the only foods on Earth that never spoils when stored properly at room temperature. When you refrigerate honey, it crystallizes and becomes thick, hard, and difficult to use. While crystallization itself isn't dangerous, the real problem comes when people try to liquefy refrigerated honey by heating it up. Many seniors will microwave crystallized honey to make it pourable again, but this process destroys the beneficial enzymes, antioxidants, and antibacterial properties that make honey so valuable for health. Even worse, overheating honey can create compounds called hydroxymethylfurfuryl, which in high concentrations can be toxic. Let me share the story of Dorothy, a 79-year-old woman who had been using honey as a natural remedy for her seasonal allergies and occasional sore throats. Dorothy kept her honey in the refrigerator because she thought it would prevent it from going bad. When the honey crystallized, she would microwave it for several minutes until it was liquid again. She came to me complaining that her allergies were getting worse despite using local honey every day, and she couldn't understand why. When I asked about her honey storage and preparation, Dorothy explained her routine. I had to tell her that by refrigerating and then overheating the honey, she was essentially destroying all the beneficial properties she was trying to get from it. She wasn't getting any of the local pollen that helps with allergies, and she wasn't getting the antimicrobial benefits for her throat. Dorothy looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "You mean I've been wasting my time all these months?" It wasn't a waste, I assured her, but from now on, she needed to store her honey at room temperature in a sealed container. Since making that change 6 months ago, Dorothy has noticed a significant improvement in her allergy symptoms during pollen season. She keeps her honey in her pantry now, and if it crystallizes naturally over time, she simply places the jar in warm water to gently liquefy it without destroying its beneficial properties. But hold on, because the sixth food on this list is something that absolutely baffles me every time I see it in a patient's refrigerator. I'm talking about potatoes. Whether they're russet, red, sweet, or any other variety, potatoes should never be stored in the refrigerator, and the reason why is particularly important for seniors with diabetes or blood sugar concerns. When you store potatoes in cold temperatures, an enzyme process begins that converts the potato's starches into sugars. This not only changes the texture and flavor of the potato, making it gritty and sweet when cooked, but it also dramatically increases the glycemic index of the potato. For seniors who need to watch their blood sugar levels, this is dangerous. A refrigerated potato can spike blood sugar levels much higher than a properly stored potato would. But there's an even more concerning issue. When these high-sugar potatoes are cooked at high temperatures, particularly if you fry or roast them, they produce much higher levels of acrylamide, a chemical compound that has been linked to increased cancer risk in multiple studies. So by refrigerating your potatoes, you're essentially creating a food that's worse for your blood sugar and potentially increasing your exposure to harmful compounds. I remember Sarah, a 65-year-old woman with type 2 diabetes, who was struggling to keep her blood sugar stable. She was following her diet plan carefully, taking her medications as prescribed, and exercising regularly, but her morning blood sugar readings were consistently higher than they should be. Sarah was meticulous about tracking everything she ate, and we went through her food diary together multiple times, looking for the culprit. Finally, during a home visit to better understand her daily routine, I opened her refrigerator and saw a large bag of potatoes in the vegetable drawer. Sarah looked confused when I asked about them. She said, "My grandmother always stored potatoes in the root cellar, but I don't have one, so I figured the fridge was the next coldest place." That was the problem. The potatoes she was eating for dinner several times a week were converting to sugar in the fridge, and even though she was carefully measuring her portions, she was essentially eating much more sugar than she realized. Once Sarah moved her potatoes to a cool, dark cabinet in her kitchen, storing them in a paper bag away from onions, her blood sugar control improved noticeably within 2 weeks. She called me, excited, saying, "Dr. Brooks, I finally feel like I'm getting a handle on this diabetes." It wasn't that she needed more medication or a more restrictive diet, she just needed to store her food properly. Now, the 7th food is going to make a lot of you check your refrigerators right after watching this video. I'm talking about garlic. Whole, unpeeled garlic bulbs absolutely should not be stored in the refrigerator, and the reason has to do with a potentially deadly bacteria called Clostridium botulinum. Garlic, when stored in the cold, humid environment of a refrigerator, can develop conditions perfect for botulism bacteria to grow, especially if there's any moisture on the bulb. While botulism from garlic is relatively rare, when it does occur, it's extremely serious and can be fatal. For seniors with weakened immune systems, the risk is even higher. Additionally, refrigerated garlic becomes rubbery, sprouts more quickly, and loses its pungent flavor and many of its beneficial compounds, including allicin, which has powerful antimicrobial and heart-healthy properties. I had a patient named Thomas, a 72-year-old man who loved cooking Mediterranean-style meals. Thomas came to my emergency clinic one evening with difficulty swallowing, blurred vision, and muscle weakness. These are classic signs of botulism, and they're terrifying to experience. After immediate treatment and a thorough investigation into what he'd eaten, we traced it back to garlic he had been storing in his refrigerator for weeks. The garlic had gotten slightly damp, and Thomas had used it in a marinade that sat at room temperature for a few hours before he cooked with it. The combination of refrigerator-stored garlic, moisture, and time at room temperature created the perfect storm for botulism bacteria to produce their toxin. Thomas spent 3 days in the hospital and told me afterward, "Dr. Brooks, I thought I was dying. Over garlic. I never knew something so simple could be so dangerous. The recovery was long and frightening for Thomas, but he learned a crucial lesson. Now he stores his garlic in a small terracotta garlic keeper on his counter, where it stays dry, gets air circulation, and maintains its beneficial properties. He's been cooking safely for over a year now, and he makes sure to tell everyone he knows about proper garlic storage. The eighth food on this list is something many people receive as gifts or buy in bulk without thinking about storage: chocolate. High-quality chocolate, especially dark chocolate that many seniors eat for its heart health benefits, should not be stored in the refrigerator except under very specific circumstances. When you refrigerate chocolate, something called sugar bloom and fat bloom can occur. This is when the cocoa butter separates and rises to the surface, creating a white, chalky appearance. While this isn't necessarily dangerous, it changes the texture and reduces the antioxidant properties that make dark chocolate beneficial. More importantly, chocolate is like coffee in that it readily absorbs odors and moisture from the refrigerator. If you've ever tasted chocolate that's been stored near onions or fish, you know exactly what I mean. For seniors taking blood pressure medication, or those with heart conditions who consume dark chocolate for its flavonoids and heart protective properties, refrigerating chocolate significantly reduces these benefits. The cold temperature causes the antioxidant compounds to degrade faster than they would at proper room temperature storage. I treated a woman named Helen, a 69-year-old with mild hypertension, who had started eating 2 squares of dark chocolate daily as part of her heart-healthy diet plan, based on research she'd read. Helen was diligent about this routine, never missing a day, but after 6 months, her blood pressure hadn't improved at all. She was discouraged because she felt like she was doing everything right, eating well, exercising, taking her medication, and adding this heart-healthy chocolate to her diet. During one of our checkups, I asked Helen about her chocolate routine. She explained that she bought high-quality dark chocolate in bulk to save money and stored it in her refrigerator so it wouldn't melt. That was the issue. The chocolate she was eating had lost most of its beneficial flavonoids due to improper storage. The antioxidants that were supposed to help her blood vessels relax and her blood pressure lower were being destroyed by the refrigeration and the temperature fluctuations every time she opened the fridge. Helen was frustrated but determined. She said, "So you're telling me I've been eating chocolate for half a year for nothing?" "Not for nothing," I explained, "but not effectively either." I suggested she store her chocolate in a cool, dark cupboard, wrapped in foil or in an airtight container, at a consistent temperature between 65 and 70 degrees. Within 3 months of eating properly stored dark chocolate with the same diet and exercise routine, Helen's blood pressure readings started to improve. She joked with me, "Leave it to me to mess up eating chocolate." If this information has been eye-opening for you, please hit that like button and share this video with any seniors in your life. This could prevent serious health issues for someone you love. Finally, the 9th food that you must remove from your refrigerator immediately is hot sauce or hot peppers. Many people refrigerate opened hot sauce bottles thinking they're preserving them, but most hot sauces are already naturally preserved by their high vinegar and salt content and don't need refrigeration. Fresh hot peppers absolutely should not be refrigerated for an important reason. When you store hot peppers in the refrigerator, they lose their capsaicin content, which is the compound responsible for their heat and also for their significant health benefits, including pain relief, metabolism boosting, and anti-inflammatory properties. For seniors with arthritis or chronic pain who use capsaicin topically or consume hot peppers for pain management, refrigerating peppers significantly reduces their effectiveness. Moreover, refrigerated peppers become soft and moldy much faster than peppers stored at room temperature in a dry environment. The moisture in the refrigerator accelerates decay, and many seniors with reduced vision might not notice the early signs of mold, leading to consumption of contaminated food. Let me tell you about my patient James, a 71-year-old man with severe arthritis in his hands and knees. James had read about the benefits of capsaicin for joint pain and started incorporating fresh hot peppers into his meals and using hot pepper extracts topically. He came to me after 3 months saying the remedy wasn't working and asking for stronger pain medication. James was disappointed because he really wanted to try natural approaches before increasing his prescription medications, which already gave him some side effects. When we discussed his pepper routine, James mentioned he stored his fresh peppers in the refrigerator and used hot sauce that had been refrigerated for months. I explained that he was essentially using degraded capsaicin that had lost much of its potency. James looked at me skeptically and said, "Dr. Brooks, are you seriously telling me where I store my peppers affects my arthritis?" "Yes," I told him. "Exactly that." James agreed to try an experiment. He started storing his peppers at room temperature in a paper bag and using hot sauce that was kept in his pantry instead of his fridge. Within 6 weeks, James reported noticeable improvement in his pain levels. He said, "I can open jars again without wincing." Something as simple as taking peppers out of the fridge changed that. James still uses his prescription medications, but he's been able to reduce the dosage slightly, and he's experiencing fewer side effects. Now that you know these 9 dangerous storage mistakes, let me give you the crucial information about what you should do right now. First, go through your refrigerator and remove tomatoes, bread, onions, coffee, honey, potatoes, garlic, chocolate, and hot peppers. Find appropriate storage spaces for each: a countertop bowl for tomatoes, a bread box or freezer for bread, a mesh bag and a dark pantry for onions and potatoes separately, airtight containers in cupboards for coffee and chocolate, room temperature shelves for honey, garlic, and hot sauce. Second, and this is critical, if you've been storing any of these foods in your refrigerator and you've been experiencing unexplained digestive issues, blood sugar fluctuations, or other health concerns, I strongly recommend scheduling an appointment with your doctor to discuss whether improper food storage might be contributing to your symptoms. Don't self-diagnose, but do bring up this possibility. Third, share this information with your friends and family, especially other seniors who might not realize they're making these same mistakes. Food safety becomes even more critical as we age because our immune systems aren't as resilient, and our bodies don't recover from foodborne illnesses as quickly as they once did. Remember, proper food storage isn't just about taste or convenience. It's about your health and safety. Every one of the patients I've told you about today learned that lesson the hard way, but you don't have to. You now have the knowledge to protect yourself and make better choices starting today. I want to emphasize something important. None of this information is meant to replace a conversation with your personal physician. If you have specific dietary concerns, chronic health conditions, or you're taking multiple medications, please discuss any major changes to your food storage or preparation habits with your doctor. What I've shared today is general educational information based on my years of clinical experience, but your individual health situation might require personalized guidance. As we get older, the small things matter more. Where we store an onion, how we keep our coffee, whether our potatoes are in the fridge or the pantry, these seemingly minor decisions can have major impacts on our health. But here's the empowering part. You now have the knowledge to make better choices. You're not helpless, and you're not at the mercy of invisible dangers in your kitchen. You're informed, aware, and capable of protecting yourself. Before we end, I want to hear from you. How many of these 9 foods did you have in your refrigerator? Are you shocked by any of these storage mistakes? Have you experienced health issues that might be related to improper food storage? Drop a comment below and let me know. I read every single comment, and your experiences help me create more relevant content for this community. And please, if you found this video helpful, share it with someone you care about. Send it to your siblings, your friends, your neighbors, anyone who might benefit from this information. The more people who understand proper food storage, especially in our senior community, the fewer preventable health emergencies we'll see. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss crucial health information like this. I create these videos because I care deeply about your well-being, and I want to give you the tools to live your healthiest, safest life possible. Until next time, take care of yourself, check that refrigerator, and remember that sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply knowing better and doing better. Stay healthy, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next video.